His name was Witold Pilecki. Most of the world did not know his face. Most of the world did not know his name. But among those who studied courage in its purest form, his name stood alone. He was the man who walked into hell on purpose. He was the man who volunteered to go to Auschwitz. He was the man who escaped from the most feared camp in history to tell the world what was happening inside. This is Story, A Man Before Darkness. Witold Pilecki was born in 1901, in what was then part of the Russian Empire, in a Polish family that believed deeply in freedom. As a boy, he grew up on stories of uprisings, of lost wars, of a country that no longer existed on the map, but lived inside the hearts of its people. He learned to ride horses. He learned to shoot. He learned that Poland was not just a place. It was an idea. During the First World War and later conflicts, he fought as a very young man in Polish formations, helping his nation rise again from the ashes. By the 1930s, he was a husband, a father of 2 children, and a farmer living a quiet life. He loved painting. He loved horses. He loved his family. If history had been kind, he would have grown old on his land, telling stories to his grandchildren. But history was not kind. The invasion. In September 1939, Germany invaded Poland from the west. Soon after, the Soviet Union invaded from the east. Poland was crushed between 2 powers. Its army fought bravely, but it was overwhelmed. Officers were arrested or murdered. Civilians were beaten in the streets. Entire villages were burned. Witold Pilecki did not surrender. He joined the underground resistance in Warsaw. He helped organize secret networks, smuggled weapons, and gathered intelligence on German forces. But as reports came in from across the country, one word began to appear again and again: Auschwitz. At first, it was just a name of a camp in the south. No one knew exactly what it was. Some said it was a prison. Others said it was a labor site. But then whispers started. People disappeared. Trains went in full and came back empty. The resistance needed answers. Someone had inside the insane idea. In 1940, the underground leaders in Warsaw discussed a daring proposal. What if someone allowed himself to be arrested by the Germans and sent to Auschwitz? What if that man built a resistance network inside the camp, sent out reports, and prepared the prisoners for a possible uprising when the time was right? Everyone in the room knew the same thing. Auschwitz was not just a camp. It was likely a place of death. Volunteering to go, there was the same as volunteering to die. Silence filled the room. Then he spoke. "I will go," he said. No one was surprised, but everyone was shaken. He had a wife and 2 small children. He knew that if he went, he might never see them again. But he believed that Poland could not fight blind. Someone had to open his eyes in the darkest place on earth. So he created a false identity, took the name Tomasz Serafiński, and prepared for the journey that no one else dared to take. The arrest. On September 19, 1940, German forces carried out a large street raid in Warsaw. They surrounded entire blocks, pulled men from their homes, and lined them up in the streets. Witold positioned himself in the area on purpose, waiting to be caught. When the Germans arrived, he did not run, he did not hide. He let him be taken. Beaten, abused, pushed into a crowded cell, he began the path that would lead him to Auschwitz. He did not tell the other prisoners why he was there. To them, he was just another unlucky man caught in the jaws of the occupation. On the transport train south, with men packed together in suffocating conditions, Witold looked out through a crack in the wooden boards and saw the countryside passing by. He knew that somewhere, his wife and children were looking at the same sky. He closed his eyes and whispered a silent promise that his suffering would not be meaningless. Our arrival in Auschwitz, the train finally stopped. Prisoners were shouted at, beaten with rifle butts, and forced out onto the platform. Above them, the sign of the camp stood like a cruel joke. There were barking dogs, shouts in German, and the crack of whips. Men stumbled and fell, only to be kicked back onto their feet. Witold watched everything carefully. He knew he had to stay alive long enough to do the work he came for. The prisoners were lined up, their names recorded, their identities stripped away. Tomasz Serafiński, his false name, became prisoner number 4859. His clothes were taken from him. He was shaved, disinfected, and given striped prison garments. From this moment, he was no longer a man with a family, a home, and a past. He was a number in a machine of death. Inside, the hell. Auschwitz was not just a prison. It was a carefully designed system meant to break the body and the soul. There was endless forced labor, little food, constant beatings, sickness, and random executions. Prisoners froze in the winter and collapsed from heat in the summer. Men disappeared overnight, taken to work sites from which they never returned. Some were shot as punishments, some were worked to death, others were used in cruel experiments. And over time, trains began to arrive not only with political prisoners, but with whole families. Jews from Poland, from France, from other parts of Europe, poured into the camp. Many of them were sent directly from the train to buildings disguised as shower rooms. Witold watched the smoke rise from the chimneys and began to understand the truth. Auschwitz was not just a labor camp, it was a factory of death, building a resistance in a world of fear. Even in this place, Witold did not forget why he came. Slowly, carefully, he began to build a secret network of trusted prisoners. He found men who were willing to risk everything for even the smallest chance to fight back. They worked in different parts of the camp. They carried messages. They shared information. They encouraged those who were close to despair. They counted the number of people arriving and disappearing. They memorized the structure of the camp. They wrote down signs of mass murder. But there were no pens, no paper, no cameras. So, used memory. Every detail was stored in the minds of men who were beaten and starved, but refused to let the truth die. Witold organized them into units, like a secret army behind the wire. He dreamed of the day when the outside resistance would attack the camp, and his men inside would rise. It was a dream he held tightly, even as he watched thousands perish around him, sending reports to the world. The hardest part was getting information out of the camp. Witold and his men needed to find ways to contact the resistance in Poland. They used civilian workers, stolen moments with Poles who worked near the fences, and even bribed some guards who were more greedy than loyal. Little by little, messages slipped out. They described the starvation, the brutality, the endless work, and most importantly, the mass murder of Jews and other prisoners in gas chambers and crematoria. These reports traveled through underground channels to the Polish resistance, and from there to the government in exile in London. There, in offices far from the snow and smoke of Auschwitz, people read the words of prisoner 859 and struggled to believe them. The scale of the horror was beyond imagination, but Witold did not exaggerate. No words were strong enough to fully capture the reality. He reported anyway. He did not write to shock. He wrote to warn. He hoped that the Allies would act on what he sent. He hoped someone would come. Life on edge of death. Day after day, year after year, Witold lived on the edge. He suffered hunger, exhaustion, and infection. He watched friends die in front of him, men with whom he had shared bread and whispers. He saw prisoners turn on each other under the pressure of fear and cruelty. He saw others keep their humanity even in the mud and blood, sharing a crust of bread, a comforting word, a silent prayer. He clung to one idea. As long as he was alive, the resistance inside Auschwitz lived. As long as he could send reports, the world outside could not say, "We did not know." But over time, a new fear began to grow inside him. He realized that his dream of an uprising might never come. The camp was too heavily guarded. The Allies had other priorities. If he died inside the camp, so much knowledge would die with him. He had done what few men could ever imagine, but there was one more step to take. He had escape. The escape plan. Escaping from Auschwitz was considered impossible. The camp was surrounded by barbed wire, watchtowers, armed guards, and open fields. Anyone caught near the fence was shot on sight. But Witold had watched the rhythms of the camp for years. He knew which guards were lazy, which posts were weaker, which work units had slightly more freedom of movement. He chose 2 trusted men to escape with him. They waited for the right moment, when they would be assigned to work in a position closer to the outer edge. Then, one night in April 1943, their chance came. They loosened screws on a door, slipped out, and moved carefully toward the outer fence. There, pounded. They knew that one wrong step, one unlucky shout, one stray bullet, could end everything. They cut the wire, crawled through, and ran. Behind them, Auschwitz stood like a nightmare against the sky. In front of them, Poland lay in darkness. They ran into that darkness, hoping that somewhere inside it there was still a path to freedom. Freedom and frustration. After days of hiding, avoiding patrols, begging for help, and moving from village to village, Witold reached resistance contacts. He finally stood outside the wire again, a free man. His body was thin, his face aged, but his mind was clear. He wrote detailed reports about what he had seen inside Auschwitz. He explained the structure of the camp, the process of mass murder, the numbers of people being killed. The Polish underground sent these reports to the Allies. They reached London. They reached people who had to act. But the response was slower and weaker than Witold had hoped. The Allies were focused on winning the war as a whole. They argued about strategy, about air raids, about front lines. Some believed the reports. Others doubted them. Some asked if anything could really be done to stop the killing in the camp without sacrificing the larger war effort. Witold pushed for an attack on Auschwitz, for a plan to arm the prisoners, for a coordinated uprising. His proposals were considered too difficult, too risky, too uncertain. He had walked into hell, built an army in chains, escaped against the odds, and shouted the truth to the world. But the world did not move as fast as the chimneys of Auschwitz burned. The war ends. In 1945, the war finally turned. The Soviet army advanced from the east. German forces withdrew. The Nazis tried to cover their crimes, destroying buildings, burning documents, forcing prisoners on death marches. Auschwitz was liberated in January 1945. The world saw the piles of shoes, the mountains of hair, the empty cans of gas, the skeletal survivors. Witold watched this from outside, knowing that he had tried to warn everyone years earlier. The truth was now undeniable. But for him, there was no joy in being proven right. There were only faces of the dead that he carried in his memory. A new enemy. You might think that after the war, a man like Witold Pilecki would be honored and protected by his country. But Poland did not become free. It fell under Soviet influence. A new communist government took control. They looked with suspicion at men like Witold, who had served the underground loyal to a different vision of Poland. For them, he was not a hero, he was a threat. Despite this, Witold continued to work in secret, gathering intelligence on the new regime, trying to protect those who resisted the loss of true independence. He could not stop. He had fought the Nazis. He could not accept a new form of oppression. Arrested by his own country. In 1947, Witold Pilecki was arrested by the communist secret police. He was interrogated, tortured, and forced into a show trial. They accused him of spying for foreign powers, of treason, of working against the state. He admitted that he had gathered information, but not because he hated Poland, rather because he loved it too much to let it fall into the hands of another dictatorship. His words did not matter. The verdict was decided before the trial began. He was sentenced to death. When he heard the sentence, he reportedly said that compared to what he had seen in Auschwitz, this was nothing. The last night. In May 1948, in a prison in Warsaw, Witold waited for his execution. He thought of his wife. He thought of his children. He thought of the men who had died in the camp without anyone knowing their names. He did not beg. He did not break. A guard later said that he had never seen a man go to his death with such calm. He was shot and buried in an unmarked grave. For decades, no one knew exactly where. His name was erased from official history. His story was buried under layers of fear and lies. The return of his name, only many years later, after the fall of communism in Poland, did Witold Pilecki's story begin to return to the light. Historians found documents, witnesses spoke, and his reports from Auschwitz were re-examined. The truth came out. This quiet farmer, this father, this man who loved painting and horses, had done what no one else had done. He had walked into Auschwitz on purpose. He had built a secret army from within. He had escaped and tried to save those still inside. He had then fought against a new tyranny and paid for it with his life. Poland began to honor him with medals, monuments, and schools named after him. Books were written, documentaries were made. His face, once hidden, appeared in classrooms and museums. The white of one man's choice. Witold Pilecki's story is not easy to listen to. It is full of pain, betrayal, and loss. But it is also full of courage, dignity, and an unbreakable sense of duty. He did not have superhuman powers. He was not protected by magic or fate. He was simply a man who decided to do what he believed was right, even when the cost was everything he had. He could have stayed with his family. He could have hidden. He could have survived the war as just another victim of history. Instead, he chose to walk into the heart of horror so that the world could not pretend it did not know. The lesson he left behind. Today, when people study the Second World War, they speak of battles, generals, and nations. But there are also the stories of individuals who carried entire worlds on their shoulders. Witold Pilecki, one of them. He proved that a single human being, armed not with weapons, but with courage and conviction, can stand in front of the darkest forces that humanity can produce and still refuse to bow. His life asks a question. If he could do what he did, with so little support, with so much against him, then what are we willing to do when we see injustice, cruelty, or lies in our own time? He did not to see a free Poland, but his courage helped shape the soul of his nation, and his name now stands as a symbol for all those who choose conscience over safety. His story is not just about the past. It is a reminder that even in the worst darkness, there are people who will walk into the fire so that others may one day walk in the light.